Awesome. Hebrews chapter number 11 is going to be our launching pad. We kind of, as you say, Robert kind of got us started off here with this faith to face kind of thing. Picked it up and just been running with it. And I think that's a great way to pick up on some of these people that we're going to be studying about out of the New Testament or the Old Testament as we look through this. So I like that faith to face. So we're going to be looking tonight at faith to face the familiar. Then we're going to look at faith that is forsaken faith. Then we're going to look at a faith that is fortified. There'll be three topics as we look through this tonight. Let's look, starting in Hebrews chapter number 11, looking in verse 11. It's pretty, as Sean mentioned. Hey, Phil, where'd you go? What's the name of that guitar? Hebrews 11, through faith also Sarah herself. Some of the stuff you just can't write, can you? I mean, some of the stuff you're just like, this is amazing. So through faith also Sarah herself received strength to conceive seed and was delivered of a child when she was past age, because she judged him faithful who had promised. Now, I got to be honest, whenever I started, I was looking ahead, reading, planning ahead and stuff. Of course, I wasn't really expecting Sean to get on to Abraham Sunday, so I was kind of hanging out around him. So when he preached on him Sunday, it's like, okay, I'm going to be on Sarah now, And there's a part of me that was excited, and then there was a part of me that's like, man, I don't know a whole lot about Sarah, And to be honest with you, I don't know that I have ever taken and studied a woman that was in Scripture. I don't know that I've ever looked at, through the eyes of a woman at what was going on. So I spent a lot of time with my wife questioning her, asking her, what would you do? What would this look like? How would you, what do you think this would sound like? So I got some good insight. So the first time that we're introduced to Sarah, of course, we know that she was Abram's wife. And of course, we know that originally her name was Sarai. I know I'm messing it up, but God changed her name later on. And so right now it's Abram and Sarai. I think that's right. I probably messed that up. But at any rate, so they're married, living in Haran. God comes up and says, time for you to leave. Time for you to get on up out of here. Take your stuff, head south. So he grabs a hold of everybody, takes Lot, takes Sarah, and it says that they took all that they had. I'm going to be in Genesis chapter number 12, and I'll read this stuff because we're going to actually run from 12 to 20. So we're just bounce through the first part from Genesis on this. It says, and Abraham took Sarah, his wife, and Lot, his brother's son, and all their substance that they had gathered, and the souls that they had gotten in Haran. Now that's key right now because we're going to look at that. We're going to see how that plays in here in a little bit. But anyway, so Sarah is following along with Abraham, get into Haran, come down into Canaan. There's a famine in the land. And then we find that now in verse number 10, there was a famine and they're heading down towards Egypt. Now, so I'm asking my wife, and I'm telling her, it's like, help me out, give me some insight here. What would this look like? Me and you, I say, hey, we're going to Africa. We're going to leave this. We're going to go to a place where I don't even know where in Africa. We're just going to Africa, right? Now when we get down into Africa, what it's going to be around. See, a lot of times when we're reading about these people and when we're studying, because we know how it ends, oftentimes we think that they're the only ones on earth right now, right? They're the only ones there. Well, we got to remember, these people come from, these were huge cities that they come from. There was travelers all through, word got around. So they know what Egypt is going to be like when they get down there. They know what they're about to step into, right? Because we know that whenever they go down there, Abram's like, listen, you're 65, but man, you with. When we get down there, they're going to want you. We ain't got no choice. We got to go because we're dying here. We're losing everything that we got, right? Everything's dying off. When we get down there, they're going to want you. In order to save me, going to need you to say I'm your brother, right? So I'm talking to my mom and telling her, it's like, imagine I tell you that. Imagine I say to you, we're going to go to a place and we all understand, what's going to happen to you, a foreigner. We're entering into a place where this guy has got complete rights. He can just take anybody off the street. Nothing matters. And more than likely, you're going to enter into his harem, right? I say, what would go through your mind like that? She said, I would starve. I said, hunger is a powerful motivator, honey. I said, I don't think that you would starve. But I'm turning and I'm thinking, if I'm Sarah, or if this was flipped on me, I'd be like, okay, listen. So check this out, dog. We're going into a place, me and you both know what's going on, and we know that regardless of what happens, I'm going to be subjected to some stuff. We both know that. But what you're saying is, to save your life, you want me to say that you're my brother. You're not willing to die for a sister? You're not willing to, you know what I'm saying? Where to love at, man? I mean, you got the promise. You're supposed to be undefeatable, invincible. Let's test you. Let's test your faith. That's what I'd probably look at and say, that's what I was thinking. But this is, so he doesn't, but they don't. Go on down, she falls right in line. So, and because there's not a lot really about like what Sarah did, what she said, you kind of have to read the whole thing and then get a sense of, and kind of read between the lines in a sense and understand what was going on, to try to get an understanding of what type of demeanor, what type of person that she was, right? Because we find that this is not the only time that this happens. We're going to find that this happens again later on. But the circumstances that come from that, the events, everything that follows from that is going to be much different, much different. So they go into Iran. This is a faith to face the familiar, because they both know what's going on. They both know what's about to happen. They both know that they're getting pushed out and away, and they're going to be facing these things, that they understand what they're going to be facing. Like I said, remember, they're not the only ones on the earth. People travel back and forth. Word gets out. They know what it's like in Egypt. They know how it's going to be. So it's faith to face the familiar, even when you know it's going to be scary, right? Even when you know it's going to be awkward, right? You have a situation, something goes on at home, something goes on in the neighborhood, something goes on in work, right? And you might have had a dust up with somebody, and I do my best to try to avoid it as long as I can. Right? If I got to take another route through the shop, so I ain't got to speak to them, I'll take another route through the shop. But I know eventually I'm going to have to talk to this person. Right? And I heard one guy say one time, he said, if you're going to eat crow, the best way to eat it's hot. Because the colder it gets, the worse it is. I thought, man, that's pretty good. And that has helped me in a lot of situations. I know I got to apologize when I know I got to step up and do something. You may just go ahead and do it right then. Because the more you ponder, the more you think on it, the worse it's going to be. Right? So it's faith to face that familiar. It's faith whenever you're facing into those circumstances, when you face into those things and you're like, God, I really don't want to do this, but I know it's the Spirit of God that's pushing me and telling me, I got to correct this. You and I both know they started it. You and I both know they provoked it. You and I both know that they know that that was my button. You and I both know that they knew that that was my nerve. But the way that I reacted wasn't right. And I got to apologize for what I did. Right? That's hard, ain't it? I mean, that's hard. That's that kind where you're just like, right. Faith to face the familiar. When we know what we're getting into is going to be awkward. It's going to be tough. They have faith to face the familiar. Then we have faith that was forsaken. So we find out about her in chapter 11, and then we don't really hear a whole lot again until chapter number 16. 16 is familiar. 16 is where what has happened now. They've gone down into Egypt. They've come back up, and they've been in the land for 10 years. Now, some of the commentators that I read after, they believed, it was believed, Jewish tradition was believed, that whenever they were living outside of Canaan and Sarah was barren, they believed that she was barren because they had not stepped into that promise and moved to that promised land. And this is just reading some different stuff, trying to get an understanding of how this stuff worked, why this would have happened, and all this other stuff, right? So I'm trying to wrap around her mind, trying to get an understanding. So now they've been in the promised land for 10 years. Still no baby, right? Sarah's getting upset. Sarah's getting impatient. Ever done anything to where when you look back, in that moment, this was a great thing. This is how it is. This is right. I was asking my wife that. I was like, what would be something that in the moment this was a great idea. This was a perfect thing to do. And then you look back and you're like, what in the world? She said, dyeing your hair. I said, that's a good one. I wouldn't have that issue, but I can understand how that you would. I said, that's a good one. I said, and I told her, I said, I'm thinking, you know, nothing says I love you at Christmas like putting the whole thing on a credit card. Right? I mean, how else do you do it? I got to thinking, you know, maybe it was some of that, you know, kind of Eddie and Clark Griswold thing where you're buying everything for everybody else and then you're having that little conversation. You say, put something on there for yourself. You know, like, yeah, I think I will. Every man needs a $4,000 Snap-on roll toolbox. You know? But then your wife is like, you have a hammer and a screwdriver. Right? Well, this is my reason to get more stuff because now I got somewhere to put it. I'm going to start doing stuff. Now I'm going to be the handyman. You know? Then January, February rolls around, that first statement comes, you're like, golly. I still got the tags for that toolbox. You know? I thought about like doing home improvement, right? You have a crazy weekend when you're flipping through, it's nasty outside or whatever, and you land on DIY network, right? And you're like, glory to God, we can take this wall out in 30 minutes. You know? I mean, hallelujah, they done a whole patio in an hour. Let's roll. You know, and on your 720th trip back to Lowe's, you're like, why did you talk me into this? You know? I'm thinking about those things where and in the beginning, it sounds like it's a great thing, it's a great idea. And then as we look back, we're like, what in the world were we thinking? Right? Similar thing happens here with Sarah, with Hagar. She's getting upset. She's ready to see that promise fulfilled. She's ready to have that child. And in their custom during this time, this within their world system, this would have been considered their child, even though it was coming through Hagar, even coming through the handmaid of Hagar. Right? For those of you maybe unfamiliar, Abraham is married to Sarah. Sarah has a handmaid, and unless I'm mistaken, the way that this is defined is this would have been someone who was close to her. This would have been someone that she dealt with every day, all day, would have been a confidant. They might have picked and joked up and cut up. You know what I'm saying? She's like, you don't even know. Maybe she had a conversation with Hagar. She's like, hey, listen, Hagar, got a little proposition for you. What do you think about being a surrogate mother for us? You know? Hagar's, we don't know. Obviously, this is all speculation, right? But we do know is Abram hearkened to her voice. Wasn't no debate about it. Wasn't no deliberation about it. Wasn't no arguing about it. Wasn't no let me think about it. He hearkened to her voice. I think Abram was getting a little impatient as well. I think Abram was ready to see that. Because as you look back, and some of the commentators was saying that Sarah's mind could have been that of God said it was coming through your seed, not through me. So it could be that you know what I'm saying? Right? And ain't that awesome? Because in the beginning, she says that she is barren, that the Lord has restrained her womb. Right? So in that moment, she gives honor and glory to God, and she recognized that God is the one who is sovereign over the womb. Then right beside of it, she brings Hagar around. She acknowledges the sovereignty of God and that God had a plan, and then she says, but we're going to do it this way. Thought of the number of times that I've done that. God's got a plan. You know, God's got something that He's going to do, but this is how He's going to do it. God, I got you. I got the big picture. I see what you want to do now. I see what you want to do. I got it now. Let me take this. I'll go ahead. I'll take this. I got it from here. Appreciate it. Right? Don't we do that? We do that. We do that from the moment of salvation. Say, God, I can trust you with my eternal soul. Not a problem. She trusted Him with the womb. It's something really she couldn't see. She didn't know. She'd never been pregnant before. She didn't know nothing about it. She was trusting God with the unknown. But with the tangible, with the everyday stuff, I got this. I got this. We do this all the time, don't we? We'll say, God, I trust you with my soul, but this is how I'm going to handle. This is how I'm going to handle kids. This is how I'm going to handle my wife. This is how I'm going to handle my anger. This is how I'm going to handle my finances. I know you say stuff about it in there, and I got you, but this is how, right? And then God says, okay, here's what we're going to do. He's like, you want to handle it your way? That's cool. I'm going to show you something. Right? And he says, let's take a little bit in finances away. Let's turn that pretty little 2-year, 3-year-old child, we're going to flip him. Got that teenager now. You know, like, God, what happened? Like, God, what do I do with the everyday stuff? You know, what do you do with the times where you know you're going into the alcohol and you're just like, God, I don't have a clue what I'm going to say. I don't have a clue how this is going to go. I know when the last time I left them making sure I got the last punch in. I know I left it like that. But you ain't letting me get by with that. I got to correct this. I cannot afford to lose my testimony this way. I've got to square this up. And I don't have a clue how it's going to go. I don't know how they're going to receive me. And I know I've got to go with hat in hand. But God, this is what I'm going to do. I don't know how we got our finances so messed up. I don't know what I'm going to do, God. But I do know that from now on, I'm going to trust you and I'm going to trust your way. And we're going to see what happens your way. Because I've tried my way. I got the big picture and I decided I was going to work the details in myself. Right? God says, I need you to work on your anger. I need you to work on your temper. So I'm going to put somebody working right beside of you that all day long is just going to give you that. Just going to give you that. You don't like the way they look. You don't like the way they smell. You don't like the way they work. They work too slow. You know, they're coming in late and that's just right there beside you. You got to deal with that all day long. Right? This is when God's just working in us, working on us. And all the time we come to church, right? We come to Lord, work on me. Lord God, change me. Help me. It's like, okay. And you're like, not like that though. That's not really what I meant by change me. He says, I know what you meant, but here's the root. You want me to change the fruit. I can't change the fruit without changing the root. You want more? You think that if your finances have gotten bad and somehow you go to the mailbox and you open it up and you got a check in there from Uncle Larry that you didn't even know you had, who died and was a millionaire, and now you got $2 million in the bank, then all of a sudden your finances is going to be better. Your finances is messed up because you didn't know how to handle it. If I give you more, you're still not going to know how to handle it. And you're like, I don't like that plan. He said, I know you don't. But this is the way to have that freedom, to have that liberty, to have that peace, to have that understanding, is when you're trusting in me and you're not trusting in anything else. You're not trusting in this world. You're not trusting in what it can bring. You're trusting in me. Like, I don't like it, God. I know you don't like it. These are thoughts that just go through my head, just the impulse. You know what I'm saying? I'd rather do it this way. I know you would, but here's how we're going to do it. And that's when you just, yes, sir. Yes, sir. That's what we'll do. Same thing happens here. He said, and what was funny, as I was reading this is in 16, chapter number 16, in verse 5. So Hagar conceives, right? Must be that we can tell that she must be getting a bump, that we can tell that she is conceived, right? And in verse number 4, and when he went to Hagar and she conceived, when she saw that she conceived, her mistress was despised in her eyes. In verse 5, and Sarah said unto Abraham, now this just blew me away. I mean, in my notes I put a question mark beside this verse. Okay? Just listen. Now keep in mind, Sarah's the one that come up with this plan. Here's what we're going to do. Right? Abraham just followed along. And then what does Sarah say? My wrong be upon thee. I have given my maid to thy bosom, and when she saw that she had conceived, I was despised in her eyes. The Lord judged between me and thee. I can't believe you did that. And Abraham's like, I don't understand what's happening. I done what you told me to do. I done what I said. I'm just trying to make you, and me and you, I thought we was together in this plan. And now you see that she's conceived, and now you don't know what. And that's when Abraham's like, listen, man, my name's Paul, and this is between y'all. She's yours. Do whatever you want to do with her. When Hagar got pregnant, right, in verse number 4, because I had to read this a couple times because I was like, well, who is the her and the her? It said, when she had conceived, her mistress was despised in her eyes. So basically what I was able to find out, if the commentators are true, was whenever Hagar got pregnant, Hagar started being like, Hagar was giving it that. Because see, in this time, even though Hagar was a slave, she would have risen in status within the culture because she was able to bear a child, and something that the wife of that man could not do. So she would have been lifted up, right? I mean, you think about it today. So there's a lot of people that have infertility issues and all that stuff, and they'll ask for a surrogate mother, and every time everybody's with them, right? Everybody's with them. Every time we go to the doctor's appointment, we won't go, and you find out, right? So the status of that person has been lifted, right? And this is how Hagar was. She was lifted up. She started giving it that. She was despised. Like, you tell me what to do. I got the baby. That's whenever she turned into Hagar. She turned against Abram. She's like, man, what have you done? My wrong be upon you. There's some truth in that. Abram should have stepped up. Abram should have said, listen, I don't understand. I'm just as tore up about this as you are. I can't believe this is taking as long as it is. But God's got a way, and this is not His way. He has recognized you, and He has recognized me as being that one. And it's going to come through us, not outside of this. That is what He should have done. Now we know what's come from all of that. Ain't been nothing but hell ever since from that union. So it was a faith that was forsaken. There's a lot that we can understand, a lot of ways to empathize with her and how that turned out. Going on over to Genesis, we find out in verse number 7, in chapter 17, this is whenever her name gets changed from Sarai to Sarah. Now, based off of what I've been able to find out, the Sarai means princess. Then Sarah means noble woman, right? And all of this happens. And in chapter 18, this is whenever we find out God comes in, right? This is whenever they see Him come in. Abram's standing at the tent. God comes through, and Abram's like, there's three men come up, and He's like, y'all come in, y'all eat. Man, we're going to have a feast. It's going to be awesome, right? So they're feasting, and it says that the Lord is talking to Abram, and Sarah, must have been doing it outside, because it says that Sarah was like up against the door like that, right? She's like, listen, I got to hear what's going on. Then God says, you're going to have a child. And it says that she laughed. Within her heart, she laughed, right? Then it comes on, and the best that I can tell from that conversation, the Lord is the one that's speaking. And He comes in and it's like, she says, I didn't laugh. Or she said, I didn't laugh. But she said that because she was afraid. She denied laughing because she was afraid. But God says, oh, you did laugh. Right? And in the Randall Norman version, I feel like God said, oh, you did laugh, but I'm about to show you something. Because this is where we find the faith gets fortified. In Hebrews 11:11, it says that she considered him faithful. She judged him faithful. That means there was something that happened all the way up to this point, right? Because she ain't got pregnant yet. In that laughter, there's some doubt. In that laughter, there's some anxiety. In that laughter, there's some excitement. In that laughter, there's some apprehension, right? But that doubt is mingled in there, right? Because she's hearing this and she's like, I doubt it. I don't think so. I was like, hold on a minute. Y'all about to see something you ain't never seen before. So then what happens? So then we go into chapter number 20. And that's whenever they go up into Gerar and they go to Abimelech, right? Oh, Abraham pulls the same trick. He's like, now remember, you're the sister, right? Remember, we got to keep Daddy alive, right? Get on down in there. Well, God comes to Abimelech. And they have a conversation, and Abimelech is like, bro, I did not know God. I promise I did not know. And then God's like, I know you didn't. That's why I'm saving you. You go to pray, tell Abraham to pray for you. We're going to get rid of some of this stuff. But what ends up happening is Abimelech comes to Abram, and he says, Abram, here's a whole bunch of stuff. Here's a whole bunch of oxes. Here's a whole bunch of camels. Here's a whole bunch of money, right? Now, the difference between what happened in Egypt, when I mentioned before, when they come out of Haran, and it said that all of their substance, right? When you read what happens in Egypt, we're told that Pharaoh treated Abram well for her sake. He had. Now, you can interpret that a number of different ways. He treated him well. That means he gave him stuff. Or you could say he already had this stuff, so he gave him place to keep this stuff because of her. I tend to believe, because of the way that it is written, that he already had this stuff when he went down. Not to say that he didn't get more while he was there, but there was a certain amount of stuff that he already had when he went down there. Because we're not told that Pharaoh sent him away with stuff. We're just told that Pharaoh sent him away, right? Okay? So then we translate. We got to stay with Sarah. Got to stay in her mind on this, right? She's doing this. She's going through all of this stuff. She sees everything that's going on. She knows what's happening with Hagar, and she's real upset about that. Then here comes God again and says, and renews that promise and said, "You're gonna." And she starts laughing. She's like, "There ain't no way. I'm too old." And he's like, "I'm about to show you something. You did laugh, but I'm about to show you something." So now they're going to go walk on down up to Gerar, and they're going to face Abimelech. Right, so now here's the time where this faith gets fortified, because she's left. So there's been doubt all the way up to this point. So when she said that she judged him faithful, there had to be something right after that happened. So when they get down to Gerar, and Abimelech's there, Abimelech's like, "God, I didn't." He says, "I know you didn't." Abimelech, when it gets to the end of it, Abimelech has a conversation with Abram. And Abimelech is like, "Here you go, Abram. Here's all this stuff. Here's all this stuff," right? But then, in chapter number 20, let me flip over there right quick, because I know I'll mess this up if I try to. Yes. In chapter 20, starting in verse number 13, about midway through, because here's what we find. Let's start at just 13. "It came to pass, when God caused me to wonder." Now what this is we're having a conversation between Abram and Abimelech. And he's like, "Man, how could you say this to my sister?" And he says, "Well, she is my sister. She was actually his half-sister." A little weird, different day. "Came to pass, when God caused me to wander from my father's house, that I said unto her, This is thy kindness, which thou shalt show unto me. At every place whither we shall come, say of me, He is my brother." So basically what he's done, he's like, "Listen, I'm going to need you to take one for the team. Every time we go somewhere, you're going to have to say that I am your brother." Because it's a white lie. It'll let you know, it ain't that big thing. And she falls right in line with it. I mean, she was a submissive woman. I actually put this in. I was like, she did call him Lord. I didn't talk about that one. Well, I did talk about that with my wife, but she didn't. She felt like that was the wrong translation for it. She didn't feel like that was exactly what that meant, you know. But the difference here is Abimelech took the sheep. In verse number 14, Abimelech took sheep. We're literally told that Abimelech took stuff and gave it to him. The difference between that and what happened in Egypt. Men servants, women servants, gave them to Abraham and restored him Sarah, his wife. He's like, here's a whole bunch of stuff, and here's your woman too. What we can gather from this is we don't know how long that Abimelech was there. He could have been there a couple of weeks, could have been there a couple of months. We don't know how long was spaced that time, but we have to believe, based off of what happens next, that it had to be for a while, and here's why. Abimelech said in verse number 15, "Behold, my land is before thee. Dwell where it pleases thee." It's like, here's all the stuff, here's some land, man. You settle wherever you want. And unto Sarah. So this is the first time that somebody of influence, of power, and of wealth has acknowledged her and has walked up to her. It says, "I have given thy brother 1,000 pieces of silver. Behold, he is to thee a covering of the eyes unto all that are with thee, and with all other. Thus she was reproved." What is he saying? So basically what he's saying, now once again, this didn't happen in a closet. This didn't happen at some little cafe or whatever. This was a big king. Every time something happened, he had pomp, prestige. He had all kinds of stuff all around him. Nothing happened necessarily in secret. Not to mention, how do you hide all these folks, all these camels and all this stuff? You know what I'm saying? That doesn't happen in secret. So all of this is coming over. He's got a big thing, and he wants to prove and show that he had nothing to do with this woman while she was in his care. That's why he gives that money to Abram. That's why he says, "This is a covering. He is a covering for your eyes. You have been reproved." And what that said to the culture was, there's no way this man would have done this had he been with this woman. This is proof you have been vindicated in what you have done. You have walked the line. You have toed the line. You have done what you know was right, even though you laughed some time back. And what makes everything so much different is what I love about it is in 16, and he said unto Sarah, when we have stuff that we're going through, when we have stuff that comes into our lives, when we have stuff that penetrates us, that knocks us down, that thumps us in the chest, and we're struggling, and we're like, how is this going to happen? What are we going to do? When are we going to see the promise? When is this going to change? When is that better job going to come along? When is that grandchild going to come back? When is that spouse going to act right? When are all of these things going to happen? We're asking these questions, and God speaks your name, and He lands something in your lap that makes a difference in your world. And He speaks only to you. And then your faith is like, I judged him faithful. He is found to be faithful in my life. Now, she received that power to conceive through faith. You could almost make the argument that it wasn't until this, because she'd already laughed, and it says she received, through faith, she received power to conceive. You could almost stretch it and make the argument it was not after this, when God vindicated her, when God showed her, when God spoke to her and said her name, that was the moment where Sarah believed. And like, that God is real. Because right after this is when she conceives. Right after this is whenever the barrenness is gone. And she laughs and she sings and says, I have a child. And that's faith that gets fortified. Faith is not easy. Faith is difficult. Faith can be hard. But God is a gracious God. We think that He treats us the way that we treat everybody else. We think that He treats us, I see you messed up again. You messed up again. I'm one that cannot stand to repeat myself. I hate it. God's using me. There was not long ago, had a little dust up at the house. I got my wife and my son together because the dust up was real. And I said, and I got to be honest with you, before it happened, I was like, I done laid out the line. Here's where you were wrong, and here's where you were wrong. Here's what I was going to say. I'm going to read this because I made some notes. And honestly, 5 minutes before when I said that we're going to have this little meeting, God said, oh, you're going to have a meeting. Yeah, you're going to have a meeting. But here's what you say. He's like, what I want you to do, son, is I want you to admit where you was wrong. I was thinking, can't never get by with nothing. So I did. I set my crew down, and I was the one that initiated the dust up. I done everything. You know what I'm saying? Everything was on me. And so it was only right for me to make it known. I said, listen, I understand. I said, I can be short-tempered. I got 10,000 pet peeves. I'm not a good explainer. I get single-focused. I can recoil quickly and aggressively at a lack of believed ingratitude. I said, every one of these, I know, and this is just what I thought of in 3 seconds. If I'd have put 10 minutes, I could have made a whole lot more. I was like, but I looked at him and I said, I want to apologize to you for the way that I've acted. I want to apologize, and I need you to help me to correct these things. Because there's got to be a change. Keep doing things over and over, right? And expect a different result. That's the definition of insanity, right? This is how I've been handling it. It's like, if we're going to change, it's got to start with me, and it's got to be like this. God spoke into me, and He said, Randall, here's what you're going to do. You want to change, Randall? Here's what you're going to do. He steps into our lives, and He calls us by our name, and He speaks that only you can understand and that only you can hear. And it's going to sound crazy to everybody else, but there's something within your soul when that Spirit makes that recognition and acknowledges it, that yes, this is what you're supposed to do. That's when our faith gets fortified. We stand up and we trust God for what He said, even though we know we've messed up. We know we've wronged Him. And He still comes to us again with the promise. Shows us. Pastor.